The Rebbe starts off the Sicha by saying that on the pasuk Vayar Elokim Ha'or Ki Tov, that Hashem saw the light was good. Vayavdel Elokim Ben Ha'or V'Achoshen, Hashem separated between the light and the dark. Rashi quotes the words Vayar Elokim Ha'or Ki Tov, Hashem saw the light was good. Vayavdel, and he separated. And on these words, Rashi explains Af Bozel Netzrichim L'Divrei Agoda, that on these words too we need the words of Agoda. And Rashi explains, based on the Agoda, Ra'ahu, that Hashem saw, She'enoi Kedai, that it is not proper, it is not appropriate, L'ishtamish by Rishoim, that the Rishoim should be able to make use of this, V'ivdiloi, so Hashem separated it for the Tzadikim, La'asid Lavoi. Then Rashi continues and says, Ulafi Pshutoi, and simply, what the pasuk could be saying is, so Rashi says, you could explain it, that Ra'o Ki Tov, Hashem saw that it was good, Ve'eino Eloi, so it is not fitting, it's not nice, that it, the light, should be serving mixed together with the darkness, and therefore Hashem has set a specific time for the light by day, and for the other one, its time is at night. So the Mefarshim explain that the reason why Rashi needs, as he says here too, we need the words of Agoda, is because the word Vayavdel cannot be translated in the regular way how it's usually translated. Vayavdel, if you translate it simply, would mean the separation between light and dark. But you can only separate things that can mix together, and we need to separate them. But Oir and Cheshach, light and dark, cannot be mixed together. As soon as there's light, automatically there's no darkness. So what does it mean to separate between the light and the dark? And this is why Rashi needs the words of Agoda to say that Hashem saw that it was not proper, that it should be used for the Rishoim, and therefore Hashem separated it for the Tzadikim. And therefore the word Vayavdel is not in the simple sense, separating between the light and the dark, but rather that Hashem took the light and he removed it, he separated it for the Tzadikim La'asad Lavoi. And it's a continuation to this that Rashi continues, Lefi Pshuto, if we want to translate it more simply, that the word, the Havdalah, the separation, should be in a regular sense of the word, then we would have to explain it that Hashem saw that it was good. And it is not fitting that it, the light, and should, together with the darkness, should be serving in a mixture, meaning, a mixture over here would mean, not that they're both there in the same place, but rather that it, in time, meaning that up until that point there was no set time when there should be light, when there should be dark. Rather, it was just sometimes light and sometimes dark. And therefore, the separation is that now Hashem had set a specific time when each one would be. There would be light by day and darkness at night. However, says the Rebbe, according to this, it's not understood. Even though it's true that the concept of Rashi only coming to explain the simple pshat, as Rashi says, Ani lo yibasi elo l'pshutoi. So even though Rashi explicitly says this only a few psukim further, he didn't give us this rule yet, nevertheless, the simple translation of the word pshat, we have agoda, we have a drash. The simple translations of these words tell us that number one, you first explain and you first understand something according to its obvious and simple meaning, and then you move on, especially if there's something not going so smooth, then you move on to things like drashos. The Rebbe uses a word of a pasuk, vatelech lidrosh. In other words, then you go looking for the things that are not so obvious and open. Then you'll go to the drash, to the agoda, you look for other reasons and so on. The Rebbe says, even in this Rashi itself, Rashi sort of is implying this idea that when he says, Av bozeh onu tzrichen ledivrei agoda, that here too, we will need the agoda to explain this, meaning first and foremost, we would want to understand the simple meaning of the pasuk. But in our case, we have no choice, so we need to come on to the agoda. As Rashi also includes in the above mentioned pasuk that we said is going to be coming up, where Rashi says, Ula agoda hamiyashev es divrei hamikra. In other words, sometimes you'll need a drasha because, or an agoda, because there's something lacking in the pasuk, in the simple understanding, so you'll need to come on to something more. So the question is, if Rashi has a pirush in our Rashi, that he does explain it lefi pshuta, which is Rashi's second explanation, and he explains vayavdil in the simple sense, then why does Rashi need at all the words of Agadah, which according to that, the word vayavdil is not in its simple meaning, the separation between two things, but rather this concept that Hashem is separating or moving the light towards the time for the tzaddikim, for the future. The Rebbe says, even if we'll say that there's some sort of problem with this pshat of lefi pshuta, it's not so smooth, because then the separation is not between the light and the dark itself, but rather that we're setting a special time for each one, and therefore, yes, fine, we also need the words of Agadah. Nevertheless, the simple pshat, the one of lefi pshutoi, still seems to fit more with the simple meaning of the word vayavdil, and also fitting with the content of the next words in the pasuk, where Hashem is separating bein ha'oir bein ha'choshech. It still seems to be fitting more than the pirush of the Agadah of vayavdil, that it's for the future. So if that's the case, Rashi at least should have brought the pirush that's lefi pshutoi before the pirush of divrei Agadah. The Rebbe says another thing we need to understand. Since the difficulty in the pasuk, which Rashi is coming to answer, according to these mafarshim, and that's why he says Anu tzarichin ledivrei Agadah, is how does it make sense to say this idea of havdalah, of separation between light and dark, which are things that cannot mix together? So seemingly then, Rashi should have quoted in his Dibra Maschil also the continuation of the words of the pasuk, where Hashem is separating bein ha'oir u'bein ha'choshech. Or at least Rashi should have hinted to these words with a v'goimer. But all Rashi says is vayar lekim ha'oir kitoy vayavdil. So why isn't Rashi indicating the next words of the pasuk as well? All of this tells us, says the Rebbe, that the problem in our pasuk, and what makes Rashi give his pirush, is specifically these few words: vayar lekim ha'oir kitoy vayavdil. What's the problem in these words? The question is, it says, Vayar Elokim es ha'or kitov. Hashem saw the light is good. So what does Hashem do? Vayavdel, he separates. It sounds like this is a reason. Because Hashem saw it's good, that's why Vayavdel. Why should this be a reason for Vayavdel? This is what's bothering Rashi. And that's why Rashi says, we need the words of Agadah. Ra'ahu, that Hashem saw the goodness of this oir, and he right away said this is not fitting. It is not the right thing that Rishoyim should be having this. V'hivdiloi, and that's why Hashem separated it. The Rebbe says, based on this, perhaps now, we would be able to explain why these words of Agadah come before the explanation of the Lefi Pshutoi, by first prefacing a certain diuk in Rashi's words, in the Pirush of Lefi Pshutoi. Rashi says, Ra'o kitov, Hashem saw that it was good, ve'eino eloi, and it is not fitting or not nice that it and the darkness should be serving together in a mixture. Why does Rashi use these words, ve'eino eloi? Seemingly it would have been more appropriate for Rashi to use the words of the pasuk. The pasuk says that Hashem saw that it was toiv, so Rashi should have said, he saw that it was not toiv, it's not good for it and the darkness to be mixed together. However, says the Rebbe, the truth of the matter is, according to the pshat, actually that would not be correct. You cannot say ein toiv. It wouldn't be good for the dark and the light to be mixed together. In other words, that you wouldn't be able to say that that's a reason for the vayavdil, because since practically, as we said before, Toiv and Choshech practically cannot mix together. There's always going to be a situation that there's Oir or Choshech. They cannot be at the same time. It's just that there wasn't a set framework of when each one is going to be. They were just being sometimes light and sometimes dark. For that, you wouldn't be able to say the words Ein Toivloi, that it's not good for the light, because it's not in any way impacting the Oir or the Choshech. As each one is functioning in its time, each one is not being impacted by the other. And therefore Rashi just says, Eino Eloi, it's sort of not fitting. Since Vayar Elokim is ha'or kitov, since Hashem saw the light itself as something so good, so therefore it's not nice, it's not fitting for something so chashav, so great as the oir, that should be randomly mixing with the choshech, meaning that they don't have each one a time for itself. Based on this, seemingly, we would be able to say that the Divrei Agoda, which is that Vayar Elikim, that Hashem saw that it was good and it's no good for the Rishoyim, and that's why he put it for the Asid Lavoi, we can now say is actually a heavier reason, so to speak, more of a reason why Hashem should separate it. In other words, since it's such a good oil, it is really not fitting for the Rishoyim to be using it. That's much more of a reason than the one according to Pshat, which is just something it's not so fitting, it's not so nice for the light and the dark to keep on switching off from each other. So this was all a suggestion that Rebbe was giving, that perhaps this is why Rashi is bringing the Agoda before the Pshat. But the Rebbe is not happy with this. The Rebbe says even according to this Pshat, according to this way of understanding it, it's still difficult to say why this should be a reason to bring a Divrei Agoda, and not only bring the Divrei Agoda, but even bring it first. Because this whole business of Hashem separating it for the future is totally not hinted in the Pasuk at all. It's a matter of Agoda, and therefore it's very difficult to say why Rashi should need to have this Pshat, and especially to be able to say that it should be first. Especially if we then look at the continuation of the Pasuk, which seems to be saying clearly, Vayavdil Elikim bein ha'or ubein ha'choshech. Says the Rebbe will first understand all of this by looking again carefully at Rashi's words in the second Pshat, where Rashi repeats the words of the Pasuk, Ki Toiv. Rashi says, in the Pirush of Lipskier Pshutei, Ra'ahu Ki Toiv, that Hashem saw that it was good. Now, Rashi had just quoted in his Dibur HaMaschil, Vayar Elikim Ha'or Ki Toiv. So seemingly, Rashi should have just started off this second Pshat by saying, Ra'ahu, he saw, She'eino Eloi, that it's not fitting or that it's not nice. Why is he repeating these words Ki Toiv? In the first Pirush, in Divrei Agoda, Rashi didn't say, Ra'o ki tov, Hashem saw that it was good and it's not good, and Rishoyim shouldn't have it, etc. Rashi just started off right away. Ra'o she'enoi kedai liyishtamish bo. He saw that it's not appropriate that the Rishoyim should be using it. So why does Rashi over here repeat the words ki tov? Says the Rebbe, the explanation is, this is in fact one of the differences between the two Pirushim of Rashi. Since the Pasuk says, Vayar Elikim ha'or ki toiv vayavdil, Hashem saw that it was good and he separated it. It doesn't just say, Vayar Elikim ki toiv vayavdil. In other words, the Pasuk says these words again, es ha'or. Hashem created light, and then it says, Vayar Elikim es ha'or. Why do we need these words, es ha'or? The Rebbe says, this tells us that the vayavdil, the separation, is connected with Vayar Elikim es ha'or ki toiv. In other words, the separation is to do with these very words itself. Vayar Elikim es ha'or ki toiv. What does this mean? This is what Rashi is actually clarifying by bringing in the word in the Dibur HaMaschil only these words. Vayar Elikim es ha'or ki toiv vayavdil. And he doesn't even bring the next words of the pasuk. He doesn't even say of a gomer. In other words, the words vayavdil is not just speaking about what we're going to say next, that there's a separation between Oyer and Choshech. Rather, Vayar Elikim es ha'or ki toiv vayavdil, there's a separation within the Oyer itself. Not between Oyer and Choshech, there's a separation within the Oyer itself. That is, since Vayar Elikim es ha'or ki toiv, in other words, there's something that Hashem sees in this Oyer. What does he see? That besides the light, there is some sort of toiv within the light. So what does Hashem do? Vayavdil. Hashem is separating the toiv, this extra goodness that's in the light. He's separating that from the light. And therefore what we're left with, in an open way, is just the light aspect. In other words, just the fact that it shines, but not the toiv aspect within the light. So what the Rebbe is telling us over here is, Vayar Elikim es ha'or ki toiv means that the Ur contained two things. There's the obvious light that we see, well, let's call it the physical light, and that remains. But the toiv, the goodness of the light, there's a special goodness within the light, that's what Hashem removed. and to explain why Hashem removed the oir with the toiv, within the oir. This is what Rashi is bringing, that first pirush of the Divrei Agoda. That Hashem saw that it was no good that the Rishonim should make use of this. Says the Rebbe, this will also explain to us now. Number one, that which ben chamish lemikra seemingly doesn't ask an obvious question right away. What does it mean when Rashi says, if dilil tzaddikim, Hashem saw the light, it was good, and then he separated for the tzaddikim? Really? The ben chamish lemikra seemingly should have asked? I mean, we see light right now. So the answer is, because I said before, that we're not talking about the physical light. Hashem removed the toiv within the light. Point number two. Rashi says, if dilil tzaddikim la'asid love for the future. Why doesn't Rashi just say Hashem separated for the tzaddikim? Because Rashi is indicating that this toiv, this goodness of the light, is something that's not even possible to understand what that is right now, to know what it is right now. Even for tzaddikim, it's only going to be something la'asid love. Says the Rebbe, now we can understand why Rashi adds those words and says, Af bazeh onu tzrichim l'divrei Agoda, why he says this pirush before the pirush of Lefi Pshutoi, because it's only according to this pirush of Agoda, the word vayavdel is actually much more accurate. Because since, as we said, between oir and choshech, between light and dark, you can't say vayavdel means he separated it. You're not separating two, in other words, they were never able to mix together to start with. And therefore, in the simple sense, between oir and choshech, you're not going to be able to translate vayavdel in the regular sense. And therefore, what Rashi is telling us that vayavdel is actually, in the simple sense, Hashem is actually separating something from the oir. He's separating that toiv. And in order to explain this pirush of vayavdel and how it follows with vayar lekimis or erki toiv vayavdel, because Hashem saw the light was good, that's why he separated. That's why Rashi says, for this we need the words of Agoda. Because with these words of Agoda, we're actually explaining the pshat, we're helping understand the simple meaning of the pasuk. That the word vayavdel actually means literally. The havdalah within the thing itself that we're talking about, between the toiv within of the light and the light, the luminous aspect of the light. Just like when we said, Yirokia b'soich hamayim, and it's going to separate between the mayim and the mayim. Says the Rebbe, that's why the pirush that Rashi is going to give Lefi Pshutei is going to come second. Because even though the pirush of Lefi Pshutei will fit more with the general content of the pasuk, which the pasuk speaks about further, the separation between light and dark, but nevertheless, this pirush doesn't account for the simple pshat of the word vayavdel. As far as the simple word vayavdel, it's not fitting so well according to the pshat as it is according to the words of Agoda. Because again, according to the pshat, there is no separation between two things that were originally joined in time or space. But rather we're saying, okay, now there's going to be a certain time, day is going to be for light, and night's going to be for darkness. But it's not like there was any point that they were both together at the same time. Now we come to answer another question. Where we asked before, why does Rashi repeat the words kitoiv if it said that already in the Dibra Maschel? So the Rebbe says, even though, yes, it's true, Rashi is quoting the words of the pasuk, vayar lekim kitoiv, but it's, as we said before, to emphasize the idea that according to Pshat, the meaning of kitoiv is kipshuta in the simple sense, meaning that the toiv is, in other words, according to the Agoda, we said, the toiv is something additional to the light, and we separate it from that. But Rashi is coming to say, according to the second pshat in Lefi Pshutoi, that no, the toiv is not a separate thing to the oir, but rather Hashem saw that the light itself is ki toiv. Ra'ahu ki toiv. That's why Rashi is repeating these words, because he's coming to say that according to this pshat, it's actually he saw the light that's good, not that there's some good in the light. Says the Rebbe, according to all of this, we could also explain what the Rebbe calls Yenishal Torah, the wine of Torah. In other words, the more chassidus aspect of the Torah within Rashi. We could explain Rashi's words where he starts off and he says, Af bozeh, here too, we need the words of Agoda. What does it mean by here too? Where else did we need the words of Agoda? So simply, this is referring to what Rashi had said earlier on the word Bereishis, where Rashi said, Eina mikra ze oimer elo darshuni, that this pasuk is demanding some sort of drash. And the question over here is, the Rebbe's question on these words are, L'may nafka mina. It's very nice, he's telling me here too we need a Agada. But why is it relevant that this is not the first time that we're using an Agada, where this is coming in addition to the previous time we used Agada? In other words, even if we never had Agada before, if we need it over here, Rashi should bring it over here. So why is it relevant to say Av Bazeh? In other words, by Rashi saying Av Bazeh and Tzricha L'Divri Agada, that here too we need the words of Agada, it sounds like the words of Agada have some sort of connection in some way similar to the Derasha Rashi gave on Bereishis Bara. Says the Rebbe, the explanation is, in the Pirush on the first pasuk Bereishis Bara, Rashi said, as quoted just before, Ein HaMikra Hazeh Omer Ela Darshuni, this pasuk is demanding some drasha. And what is the drasha Rashi gives there? That when it says Bereishis, it means that Hashem created the world for the Torah that's called Reishis, as in the pasuk Reishis Darkoi. It's also created for the Yidden, who are called Reishis, as in the pasuk Reishis Tvuasoi. In other words, the fact that the Torah starts off with the word Bereishis, which is hinting to Torah and Yisrael, even though Torah is speaking about the creation of heaven and earth and everything within them, and the Torah is only given much later, and so too the Yidden only become a nation much later after going out of Mitzrayim and receiving the Torah. By Torah introducing first this word Bereishis about Torah and Yisrael, it's telling us, it's giving us the clarity and the instruction that the real Metzius of the whole world, Bara Lekimis HaShamayim V'Sardas, that Hashem creates heaven and earth, is not a goal and an end for itself, an independent thing. It's all for Torah v'Yisrael. In other words, the Derash, the Agada within Torah, which as the Alter Rebbe tells us, most of the secrets of the Torah are hidden in the Agadas. Agada is revealing to us the Pnimi is the truth of creation. That it's not an entity for itself, but rather it's for Torah and Yisrael. Now we come back to our Rashi. Says the Rebbe the same thing is regarding Oir. Where Rashi says, here too we need the words of Agada. In other words, we need to here too reveal the Pnimius of the Oir, of light. Oir is not a Metzius, is not an entity for itself. In other words, like this, all other creatures, all other creations are an entity for themselves. The exception to this is the concept of light. What is simply the idea of light? It's only in order to reveal, to show those things that are there already. It's to reveal them. In other words, without the light, they're going to be concealed, they're going to be dark. And the light is coming to reveal them. That's the simple way how we understand Oir. Comes along the Agada. The Agada is coming to reveal the Pnimius of the Oir, the inner aspect of the Oir. That, what is that? That the idea of Oir, the Pnimius of Metzius of Oir, is not only this Oir element that we're talking about, which is the light element, that it shines or that it reveals the physicality of the world around us. But Agada teaches us, no, there was something deeper in the Oir. There was also the Toiv inside the Oir. And this, says the Rebbe, is the introduction which explains the Rashi on the following pasuk. In other words, once we have this idea that there's a certain Toiv in the Oir, and that's the Pnimius of the Oir, this is now going to help us where Rashi says further. What's that? On the next pasuk, Rashi says, on the pasuk, it was an evening, it was morning, one day. So Rashi says, seemingly, according to the order of the parsha, in other words, according to all the other Sheishis Yimei Bereishis, on the second day it says Yom Sheni, on the third day it says Yom Shlishi. Seemingly, in that sequence, it should have said over here Yom Rishon, not Yom Echad. Yom Rishon means the first day, not Yom Echad, one day. So why does it say Echad? So Rashi explains, because Hashem was Yochid Ba'olami. Hashem is the one and only in the world. Malachim are only created on the second day. The Rebbe has a question. Seemingly, even though it's true, Malachim are created on the second day, but on the first day, we have this creation of Oir, of light. How could we say that Hashem is Yochid Ba'olami, Hashem is the absolute one and only, which shows that there's nothing else created? Seemingly Hashem created light already. The answer is going to be understood based on this Agada, which we just mentioned, that Agada reveals the toiv, the goodness that's in the oir. What does this mean? So the Rebbe explains. We know that it's discussed in many places, explained in many places, on the Pasuk, where Hashem says, Re'eino sati lufanecha, look, I have given in front of you, es hachayim ves hatoiv, that which is life and good, es hamavis ves hara, that which is death and bad. The Pasuk then goes on and says, uvacharto b'chayim, you should choose life. What does this pasuk mean? So it's explained in a number of places that chayim and mavis, life and death, clearly does not mean in the literal sense. Because which fool is not going to choose something that's obviously life and good instead of the opposite? Rather, the pshat is, in every single creature, in every single creation, as he lives, while he's alive, while he exists, there is both elements of chayim and mavis, life and death. That is, the gashmius of everything, the materialistic aspect of everything. That's the mavis, that's the death, because clearly nothing could create and sustain itself. So on its own, it's something dead. The ruchnius inside of it, the godly energy inside of it, that's the chayim, that's the real life. The creature's life generally, and that's in fact something that never ceases, never stops, it lasts forever. And this is what we're really saying. You should choose life. In other words, choose the ruchnius, choose the elikus. Within this itself, says the Rebbe, there's further two levels. There's the chayim in each and every creature, the level of elikus that clothes itself internally to give it life, which we call memali kalam, the level of Hashem's energy which clothes itself in a close, personal way with each and everything. And then there's something deeper. There is the toiv. The Rebbe brings the pasuk. He toiv chaz d'chamechaim. Hashem's goodness, Hashem's kindness is better, is good, is better than life itself. In other words, there's then this level of goodness of elikus, which is even higher than being able to clothe itself and internalize itself, giving life into the nevroim. And this is what we call the level of soiviv kalam, which is still the soiviv. The Rebbe calls it the soiviv kalam within the mamali. In other words, that level that remains beyond the creature. Agada shebetoira comes to reveal, in other words, he's coming to reveal the ros, the secrets, the inner aspect even of the oir. That is, that the real metzias of something is not only that it's coming, it's revealing the gashmius and of the metzias itself of the nivra. We said before, light on the superficial level, we look at it, and we say that it's revealing the creatures, revealing whatever gashmi is the creations there are. But rather, the secret of Torah, the Agada Shebetoira, is coming to reveal the real metzias inside of everything. In other words, the word of Hashem that's giving it life, that's sustaining it. And not only the first level, the level of Mamale, but even the level of the Toiv of Elikus, the level of Soiviv Kalalman, which exists in every Nivra. Says the Rebbe, so now we understand this idea that that Hashem saw that that because of the Rishoyim, it's not really appropriate to be able to use this oil. What does that mean? In other words, if this oil would be available now, if we would be able to see the elikus inside of everything now, there wouldn't be the whole concept of free choice. In other words, if we would be able to see the emes, the truth, in every single creature, that its real existence is only the godly energy, so then it's impossible to choose anything that's the opposite of that. And that's the pshat of Diloy l'tzadikim la'ased lavi. Hashem removes it for the tzadikim la'ased lavi to the time when, yes, every single creature will know that Hashem made it. V'ro kol basar yachdov, all flesh will see that Hashem spoke, that it's with Hashem's words that the heavens itself came into being. Says the Rebbe, now we go back to understand why what Rashi says, Af bozeh, here too we need the Divrei Agada. It's coming in continuation to what Rashi told us on Bereishis Baro. That is, just like the creation generally. As we said, even though Torah and Yisrael seemingly are something that were created, come along later, and yet we immediately reveal that the purpose of creation is for the Torah and Yisrael. Says the Rebbe, the same exact thing as in regards to the oil. That even though it's true, the toiv, this goodness of the oil, to be able to see the pure elikus and everything, is something that was separated from the tzaddikim la'ased lavoi, but really, that is the truth and the panimius of the oil immediately. And therefore, the creation of the oil on the first day is not in contradiction to what we say that on the first day, Hashem is the one and only, which we asked before. Well, isn't there oil? The answer is no. On the contrary, the real idea of that light that was created on the first day, and again, more specifically, the toiv, that soiviv kolalman, that's even higher than ishtalshalus, is all about to reveal that the creation itself is that there is nothing besides for Hashem. That's the point of this oil. The whole point of this oil is revealing that Hashem is Yachid Boilam, and that Hashem is the one and only. Says the Rebbe, with all of this, Rashi is also hinting to a hira, to a lesson, in the way a Yid learns Torah, when a Yid is sitting and learning Torah. And that's why Rashi emphasizes, and he says, Av bozeh onu tzrichim l'divrei Agada. We need the words of Agada. It doesn't just say we, that Av bozeh, here too, it's necessary divrei Agada. He says we need divrei Agada. As the Rebbe is soon going to explain that Anu, he's including himself. That is, a Yid can have the following thought. He says, it's all fine that those Yidden that are more connected with the world, with the matters of creation, like Esa Shamayim Esa Haaretz, or generally Yidden that are involved in business, those kind of Yidden, you might need this idea that we need to say, Ein HaMikra Zeh Omer Elo Darsheni, that the Pasuk, when you're speaking about heavens and earth, is telling you, you also need to look into the drasha, you also need to look into the pnimiyus of it. In other words, we need to reveal within the world that it's really all there for the Torah and for Yisrael. However, since the matters of the world can end up distracting him, disturbing him from his avodas Hashem, or at least it takes up some sort of space by him, and therefore he needs these drashis of the Torah to reveal to him and to remind him that the world is not a mitzvah for itself, but rather it's created for the Yidden and for Torah. And this will impact him, this will affect him, that even when he's involved in all the matters of the world, it's not going to disturb his avodas Hashem. And on the contrary, he's going to do his avoid in a way of l'shem shamayim, for the sake of Hashem. B'chol drachecha de'eyu, in all your ways you should know Hashem, making the world a dira for Hashem. So again, a person may think, fine, for the businessman, for the workman, this is all important. But the yoshev oil, the person that's involved in learning Torah all day long, a person that's involved only with matters of oir, of light, not like in Bereishis, it's not the person that's involved in the physicality of the world. The person that's just involved in oir, which is neir mitzvah of a Torah oir, since he's always standing in those bright daled amis of halacha or of tefillah, so perhaps he doesn't need the agodos, he doesn't need the pnimiyus HaTorah, the deeper revelations of what's going on. He's anyway standing in a space of light. Comes along Rashi and says, no, af bozeh, also when we're speaking about a light, Anu tzrichin l'divrei Agada, we need the words of Agada. That means even when you're involved in the oir aspect, in the light aspect of Torah. Rashi says, Af anu, we too, he's concluding himself, we need the words of Agada. To quote the Alter Rebbe in Hilchas Talmud Torah, that one needs to learn also in the drashis of the Agados, to think about them, the lessons that we learn from them, to know Hashem, to get to know Hashem. As Chachamim say, you want to get to know Hashem, then learn the words of Agada. From that you get to know Hashem and to cleave to his ways. Because most of the secrets of the Torah, which is Kabbalah and Yediyas Hashem, the knowledge of Hashem, are all hidden in the Agados. The Rebbe says, the learning of Pnimiyas HaTorah, which these days is revealed in Torah Achsidus, we need to have, not only because we need to learn and know another part of Torah, and in order to fulfill the mitzvah of Dayas Elokei Avicha, to get to know Hashem, but as Rashi says, Av bozeh, also in this, when we're learning Torah, we're involved in an area of oir, we're learning Torah oir, nevertheless, even within this itself, we also need a Pnimiyus HaTorah. Because we know there has to be the idea of Baruch Hu B'Torah Tchila, we need to make a bracha on the Torah first. We need to get before we learn Torah, only then could the Torah be oir. In other words, remembering that it's Hashem's Torah, that's when Torah becomes a samchaim, a medicine of life for the person. When he recognizes the Pnimi is the truth of Torah, and that is the Toiv, the goodness within the Torah, that it's Hashem's Torah, and that through that you're connecting with the Nois and HaTorah, with the giver of Torah. And that is actually the point of what we're saying in Birchas HaTorah, remembering that it's Hashem giving us the Torah, it's Hashem's Torah. As the Bach on the tour, which is actually Nigla the Torah. And yet, what does he explain? That the point of Torah is that our neshama should become one with the very essence and with the ruchnis and with the kedusha, with the source of Torah. We should become a merkava, a vehicle, a chariot, a chamber for the holy Shekhinah of Hashem. And then when a Yid learns Torah, then the Shechina is literally inside of him. And how do we get to this? By learning Pnimiyus HaTorah, which is considered the tree of life. Elokus is shining there in a revealed way. And through learning Pnimiyus HaTorah, together, of course, with the learning of Nigla the Torah, the Raya Mehemna tells us, that I was quoting over the Zohar in the section of Raya Mehemna, that the Raya Mehemna, Moshe Rabbeinu, tells us that through learning this, we go out of the Golos berachim with mercy, when it will be revealed, this oil that Hashem had separated for the tzaddikim lost at Lavoy, but meherev yameinu mamish ba'gola didan.